Good evening and welcome back to a show where we try to distinguish between reality and a fever dream induced by too much blue light and not enough sleep. The headline for tonight is simple. 36 posts were fired into the digital ether yesterday, resulting in two distinct market bursts that moved money with the precision of a sledgehammer wrapped in velvet. We have our usual cast of characters who are both wrong about everything happening simultaneously. We have a registry seal to read like a hostage proving they still know how to spell numbers. And we have an economy that seems perfectly content to ignore the news entirely until it absolutely has to pay attention. Let's start with the math, because the math is the only thing in this room telling the truth. The first burst of activity consisted of 30 posts over 126 minutes, which resulted in DJT rising exactly plus 5.66%, landing squarely in the 96th percentile against historical baselines. That is not a typo. That is not an estimate. That is what happens when you type fast enough to convince the algorithmic traders on Wall Street that something important is happening before lunchtime coffee even gets brewed. Then, as if the market decided it had enjoyed itself too much and needed a reality check, came the second burst. One post over 0 minutes, a single digital blink, that sent DJT down minus 0.73%, settling at the 64th percentile. So we have a day where 30 sentences of text moved an entire sector into near-record territory, followed immediately by one sentence that politely asked it to come back down to earth and be reasonable again. I am stunned every single night that the market did not care about half of this stuff until someone else told them they should. The content of these posts is a masterclass in selective geography. The top topics were defense war with 9 mentions, followed by economy, election, China tariffs, and energy oil. But let's talk about what defense war looks like when it comes from the highest office in the land. Yesterday was a marathon of endorsements for people running for Congress who you have likely never heard of unless you live specifically in Tennessee's 9th District, or are currently staring at a map of New York's 4th and wondering where Hempstead Town receiver G9 Driscoll fits into your geopolitical strategy. The feed is filled with lines like, "It is my great honor to endorse highly respected state senator Brent Taylor," followed by identical copy-paste variations for candidates in Indiana, New Hampshire, Texas, and Georgia. It's a digital assembly line of patriotism, where the only variable changed is the last name and the state abbreviation. Our two colleagues, who are both wrong about what this means but will argue fiercely until they pass out on air, have their take ready. On our left, we hear that Donald just claimed he saved California's election for Steve Hilton, a guy who isn't even running. The pundit asks if the next stop is Trump announcing he personally fixed the weather because it rained too hard in Iowa. It sounds ridiculous until you read the feed and realize this is literally what happened. On our right, they are shouting that finally, our heroic president exposed the radical left's latest cheating scheme to protect Steve Hilton. They claim this proves that without him, nothing but corruption would stand a chance against us. So we have a candidate saving an election for someone who isn't even on the ballot in California, which is either a stroke of genius or a lobotomy of logic, depending on which side of the aisle you are sitting on while eating your popcorn. Then there's the gun debate, because apparently, solving every single problem requires more firearms. The left pundit notes Trump is working on a national concealed carry bill, because arming everyone seems to be the only solution while schools turn into war zones. The right pundit counters that finally we have a president who understands that nothing is more powerful than our economy, except for a patriot with a gun. They say this bill will make every American feel safe and sound, which sounds like a line from a horror movie trailer, until you realize it's just the news again. Speaking of feeling unsafe or perhaps just confused about how polls work, we have this week's poll. More than half his bursts land when the market is closed. What do you make of that? The options are: nothing, that's just when he's awake and angry; deliberate, A whole weekend of it before anyone can trade. The closed market is the point, no price to argue back. Or coincidence, he posts constantly. Some of it lands after hours. Go vote on our site because I genuinely do not know if this is a strategic masterstroke, designed to avoid immediate consequences, or just someone who cannot sleep until 2 a.m. and needs to type his thoughts into the void. And now for the part where we acknowledge that these events likely happened, but still feel like they belong in an alternate timeline. Tonight's registry seal is 9149D96F0DB, digit by letter, read aloud because I am required to do so. And it feels very important even though nobody knows what it means except the blockchain gods who are watching us all with great skepticism. I promised a correction segment earlier tonight with the enthusiasm of a man who has one ready to go at any moment. But honestly, how do you correct for a world where 30 posts move an index up and then down again, based on whether Steve Hilton is running in California? The numbers are accurate. DJT plus 5.66%, 96th percentile, followed by minus 0.73%, 64th percentile. Those are the facts we can agree on, even if our pundits will fight over a comma for the next 3 hours. Good night, everyone, and remember, if your day felt real today, you probably didn't check the percentiles against historical baselines first. Tomorrow we do it again, but I would like to note that at least one of us is going to need a nap before sunrise. And here are our sharp pundits from the booth dissecting this wild claim about saving an election for someone not even on the ballot.
Donald just claimed he saved California's election for Steve Hilton, a guy who isn't even running. Is the next stop having Trump announce he personally fixed the weather because it rained too hard in Iowa?
Finally, our heroic president exposed the radical left's latest cheating scheme in California to protect Steve Hilton. This is proof that without Trump, nothing but corruption and fraud would ever stand a chance against us.
Welcome back. After those takes, the actual numbers show 0% market movement, proving both Sarah and Rick were off by 100.